So good morning, this is Susan Lange. I am joining you with my colleagues, David Laguerra and Tricia Ryan. We're part of the Edison Ethics and Compliance Program Management team. We're gonna have a fun session here today, we hope, right before the lunch hour. We're gonna talk to you about sharing our journey around using training engagement tools to stay connected to our employees. Why don't we engage with you? If you could open the chat on the platform. It should be to your right within the impact page. And let us know a couple fun facts about you. So anything you want to share, where you work, what your role is, any fun fact about you or your company, just anything, just looking to engage with you and you engage as well with everyone else who's joined us. And while you do that, I'm going to set the context of who we are as an organization. Next slide, please. So we're going to do a polling question in one moment, but before we get that, and this is just a little bit of a warm up, get everybody primed and ready to roll here with us today. But before we do that, just to set expectations, we're going to try to work through our material very quickly. We've got a lot to cover here today, so feel free to engage with us via chat, but we're going to hold questions to the end, so we really appreciate that. So for those of you who don't know, Edison is a utility company, and we're based out of New York City. We're quite old, so just for fun, wanting to ask everyone to open chat and, open poll. And how old do you actually think Con Ed is? When do you think we were founded? Give it your best shot, and we'll give everybody a moment to answer. Okay, we'll wait just another minute or so. A couple seconds, actually. Okay, can you share the poll results, please?
Sure, 1 second. Refreshing the page. 100% said 1823.
How did you guys, I know how you got that. I sent the pre-material and the answer might have been in there. Okay, you guys are on it, as we say at Con Ed. That is one of our slogans. So next slide, please. You guys got it. So 1823. Next year will be in our 200th year. So I just want you to kind of envision that. And who we are organizationally, we operate a very large energy delivery system. So it's very hard to see that picture on the screen, but that is out of our archives. And when I get back to the office, I'm actually going to go on a little visit to check it out. But that's the original ledger from the origin of the company. And if you could read it, I know the picture's poor. The handwriting's very nice when you zoom in and look at it. Everyone's got perfect penmanship back then. But when you look at it, that is actually the original founders or people who purchased a share of the company. And there's a company on there called Ocean Insurance, and they've got one of the biggest shares. But we have evolved since 1823, and we now provide energy for basically 10 million people in New York City, Westchester, as well as north of New York City in our subsidiary of Orange and Rockland. Next slide, please. So these are some fun facts as well, just a little bit of putting it in perspective of how large we are in our service territory and some of our assets. And the only thing I'll call out on this page, you guys can read them, is that we have an asset still on record, meaning in use, active use on our system. That's a piece of gas pipe. And recognizing that you guys are joining us from all over the world and all over the country, that gas pipe is located north of Manhattan. So if you go straight up the Hudson River, it would be on the east side in a town called Ossining, New York. And unfortunately, some people might know it for Sing Sing, the prison that's located there. It's fairly famous, but Ossining is a lovely Hudson River town. And the Hudson River School of Artists have often made a lot of paintings up that way. But just think about that. We're using a gas pipe, and that was put in place and installed under Abraham Lincoln's presidency. So 1861. Next slide, please. Again, a couple more quick facts about who we are as a company. You guys can read these. I'll just call out two that are fun for me. We've got 267,000 manholes and service boxes across our service territory. And I encourage you, the next time you visit the lovely city of New York, that you'll look down at your feet and look for these manholes. They're quite artistic. A lot of them have a very beautiful artwork on them. So it was obviously something that the makers of those manholes put pride in, and you can go around the city and locate them. It's kind of a fun activity to do with kids. And then the other thing I'll point out here is on the solar side. Very recently, within the last 5 or so years, we have now become the second largest owner operator of solar generation in the US. And when I did this presentation at an ECI, a version of this presentation at an ECI event for Bentley College, we were at that time the 6th. So we're growing rapidly there. And this does show our journey from more traditional commodities into more greener, cleaner energy choices like solar. So from a population of who do Tricia, David, and I serve on a day-to-day basis, what do our employees look like? What's that makeup? We're roughly 15,000 employees, and that breakdown, give or take, translates into about 8,000 unionized or represented employees and 7,000 management employees. Next slide, please. So that's who we're serving under the Ethics and Compliance Program. So a little bit about our background, moving on, a bit of our origin story now. So the famous Thomas Edison, also a very fascinating person. This is one of his quotes. It's a particular favorite of mine. If there's a way to do it better, find it. And I think for all of us here today who are in any type of learning and education, this is sort of our mantra, right? Continuous improvement, continuous learning. So innovation is definitely part of our story, and change is always happening to us and around us, and we've kind of got to go with it. And so I was tripping over Con Edison and Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison really respected his mom, and Mother's Day is coming up shortly here. And he had 4 principles that he felt made him successful that his mother taught them. And I'm going to just read them to you. Principle 1, don't get discouraged if you fail, learn from it, keep trying. Principle 2, learn with both your hands and your head. So for us in the learning and training industry, that's the application or practice, right? We always say practice. Principle 3, not everything of value in life comes from books. Experience the world. Again, very relevant to us in the training arena. Experiential and active learning is a big part of how people learn and process. And never stop learning, keep reading, right? And his mother actually said, read the entire panorama of literature. That's a big one. But that whole idea of actively engaging as practitioners who are in the business of teaching other people. So both keeping ourselves sharp and working on ways to be innovative and creative to keep our employees engaged and learning as well. So I just found those interesting. That popped up in an article for me the other day, and I thought I'd share that with you because I feel that it's very relevant today, just as much as it was probably back in the day when his mother shared them with him. Next slide, please. So when the pandemic, again, we're going to talk about engagement tools, but I want to do, and we're all over the shock, right? We've been in this for over 2 years now, but just again, set the stage of context for us as a group, the shock was a little bit significant. We went from a very kind of traditional company at large, a company that was field and really based in our workout locations, whether they were offices or out in the field. Like you had to be there. This whole concept of working remote, we had a little bit of it, but a very little. So it was a huge culture shift for us, and it happened kind of overnight. So we went from a very traditional type of learning training team where we did most of our training in our learning center. So we still have the pleasure of having a brick and mortar building. It sits across the river from Manhattan. It's lovely. It has a beautiful view of the Manhattan skyline when you're in a classroom over there. But a lot of what Tricia, David, and I did around engaging was going out to locations live, talking to people, or having people still come to meet us, whether we're at their site or they're over at that learning center. So we really had to do a quick, this was a quick 180 pivot for us. Some of the things we're going to share with you today didn't originate because of the pandemic, but the pandemic, we were on that trajectory anyway. But the pandemic helped us move a little quicker because the organization in some ways had to catch up with what we also wanted to do. And what I mean by that is we have pockets of different regions in the company and groups that are very innovative. Don't get me wrong, we're very innovative when it comes to our customers, right? But we're not so consistent when it comes to the tools that we had ourselves to use to train people. So although we had the latest and greatest apps for customers and we had all sorts of cool things, the organization was sort of catching up on the learning and development side. They do very creative, beautiful work, but a lot of it was very traditional e-learning. So just sort of breaking the mold, Tricia came to them and asked for things like gamification or different ways to deliver shorter pieces of content. So just to, again, explain, this was big for us, right? It might not be big for you and where you are on your journey or evolution, but for us, it was a shocker and we rolled with it. So what we're going to talk about now is sort of three key principles I'm going to introduce in a moment that helped guide us on the things we did or the way we built videos, stories, and applications that helped us better connect with our people. Again, a lot of this sort of just popped during COVID. So before we do that, back over to one more polling question. Before we tell you a little bit more about what we're doing, we want to find out your comfort level of using engagement tools. Next slide, please. So if you'll all go into your polling and take a peek and give us your best thoughts. And again, recognizing engagement tools can be broadly defined. So please do. You know, for us, it's things like micro learnings, message boards, podcasts, anything you kind of want to put in there in the realm of a tool that you would use to engage with your audience. So did you have any of these barriers or do you have them? We encountered some of them in the very beginning. Like Tricia and I at one point wanted to use some software to make our own short animated videos, but we couldn't get permission. And at the time, the organization wasn't yet doing that. So we had encountered various challenges. So was it lack of skill, or you just don't know how? You don't have a subject matter expert who can do it. Maybe you don't have the time, the budget, or the resources. Lack of access. There are tools, but you kind of can't, you can't get to them or use them. You have to go through other channels, and you may or may not be a project or have a need that gets up on anybody's agenda. Or we have no barriers. We're great at engaging, and we're also pros. And I'll let you answer that for one more second. And when you're ready, Chris, if you could show the results.
So the results are 17% lack of skill, 44% lack of resources, 33% lack of access, and 6% we have no barriers and we're pros.
Well, we want you pros to let us know who you are in the chat, because we're all going to come knocking and pick your brains. But in all seriousness, we've experienced a little and of each of these as well. So we're going to talk to you about how, not necessarily how we got around them, but how our organization grew to, again, meet our needs as an ethics and compliance team that was looking for more modern ways to engage. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the principles that helped guide the work and projects that you're going to hear about. And what I want to just say, I'll keep this simple. What I want to say about these is they're not ours. We didn't make them up. Quite frankly, we learned them within the E&C and learning and development space from other experts who are design, delivery, and training experts. So they're not ours. We took them and we used them to guide us. And what you're going to see when you look at our projects is how we interpreted these principles or applied them to the work we wanted to do. So principle one is that whole shift. Again, I told you we were pretty classroom based. We also did annual training once a year. We were looking for ways to get to our population that were more flexible, that weren't necessarily one and done, right? One 60-minute training once a year. We needed more flexibility. So that's where we were going with this principle. We wanted to sort of stop pushing that content once a year and let people pull it or use it when they needed it. Next slide, please. So right now, we're going to, thank you. We're going to show you a video, and this is one of our earlier engagement tools, and Tricia is the lovely creator of it. So we're going to play the video, and then we're going to have a couple of back and forth questions, and she's going to share how a project came about and a little bit about it. So if you could play the video.
One second. We have a backup plan.
Always.
Is it displaying the video, or you guys can't see it?
Yep, we're good.
Oh, it is? Okay, cool.
Something happened at work, and it's really bothering you. You think it might go against our standards of business conduct, and you need some guidance. You contact the Ethics Helpline. It's where we turn when we have concerns or suspect misconduct regarding an ethics or compliance issue. In fact, the Con Edison companies depend on all of us to report our concerns so the situations can be remedied and a healthy work environment maintained. The Ethics Helpline is a confidential resource where you can ask questions or report an ethics or compliance concern. The helpline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So, how do you contact the Ethics Helpline? Call 855-4ETHICS, send an email to 4ethics@coned.com, or submit an online report from the Business Ethics and Compliance page on Connor. You don't have to give your name when you call or submit an online report, but sometimes anonymous allegations are more difficult to investigate. Try to be as detailed as possible in your report, no matter how you contact the Ethics Helpline. Provide any information that could be relevant to the case. Only those who need to know will be made aware of your concern. Your report will be kept confidential to the extent permitted by law and the company's need to fully investigate the matter. So, what happened?
Okay, thanks, Chris. So Tricia, talk to us about the video. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Like, what was the strategic rationale or the purpose behind building it? Was there a particular challenge or gap you wanted to address? What did you think the organization needs were?
Thanks, Susan. So this was a real fun project, and we were always on the lookout, like Susan was talking about, for new and innovative ways to share our message, engage with our audience, specifically on the ways to contact us and our investigation process. And we were inspired by another company's fabulous animation of their process, so we set out to try it for ourselves. And by creating a video like this, we were really able to accomplish some specific goals. The first was creating that tool that was something that people could pull and grab. It was for our ethics and compliance team, for our ethical ambassadors, what we call VIA advisors. But it also really kind of checked off one of those boxes on the 2020 guidelines, the DOJ guidelines about explaining the investigation process. And it did so in a clear, more simple way, because the process itself can sometimes be wordy to explain it out. And we were able to really succinctly bring that message down to the anonymity, who you contact, and the process for how we respond to those inquiries. So we worked with our learning and development organization. We call them our learning center, we're very lucky because they're very familiar with our organization, our branding, what our audience is like. And we showed them our inspiration video, and we took it from there. We had our storyboard, we streamlined, we worked hard to get to where we were at.
Great. And I think also we have the luxury, or had pre-COVID, the luxury of meeting every new hire on day one. So they do come in-house for an orientation, and the team does go out live, but recognizing that there's a little bit of training overload on day one and a lot of information, we would hand out pens and cool things, tchotchkes with our phone number. But we were really looking for another way to sort of get that immediacy of how do you reach us? and what it happens when and if something raises to the level of a concern that needs to be investigated. We would, from a culture perspective, we also recognize from our very tenured employees, there is a little bit of uncertainty or fear about that. So we felt as a group, we were kind of out teaching people that, but this video did, as Tricia said, a much better job of sort of just reiterating that in a kind of friendly way.
Yeah, and what was great about it is it creates a kind of that standard message, a common message that we were saying on contacting the ethics helpline, the investigation process. So not only did our new hires hear it, when we used it on our management trainings or we use it with our VI advisors, we are literally creating a common same message on the ethics helpline investigation process. So it really was a great way to create that, to set the tone. We also have this posted on our intranet site, which we call Connor. You heard it referenced in the video, Connor site. So we also encourage leaders and other people managers to access these the library of our resources so they can play it at staff meetings, safety meetings, wherever.
Great. Okay, next slide, please. We're going to continue on our journey. So once Tricia cut her teeth on that, it was really well done and well received. We moved on. And unfortunately, we wanted to show you this next clip or video, but we're not able to. But Tricia's going to do a little bit about she's going to talk about this next series. She's going to set up this one scenario and share it with you. But if you could see it, what would be most interesting is to see the sort of growth and the level of sophistication from the development side, not just sort of the graphics, but the whole instructional design package, and just the video, the quality of the video itself. I did not have a hand in this. It's pretty darn polished. We're pretty proud of it. So Tricia, over to you. Why don't you talk to us about how the animated series, the Ethics Zone, came about, sort of the background on the why we built it. Walk us through this storyboard that we're looking at on the screen. And then if you could talk to us about some of the other topics and videos that are within the series that you're looking to build or have built.
All right. Thanks, Susan. This was definitely a wish list item for us. We had been mulling around the idea of animating what we call our manager talking points, which are quarterly messages that we send out on risk areas. So we were able to develop a very creative series called Ethics Zone. It's based off the popular 60s sitcom with Rod Serling character as our inspiration. We picked that theme and it was a play off of that. And we used Rhoda, who's our storyteller. She's a more modern Rod Serling, but it plays off of that with the black and white and stars and different things. Unfortunately, we can't share that. As you'll find out, it's one of our challenges. But it does a great job. It starts with the storyteller, Rhoda, setting the stage for the story and entering us into the ethics zone. And then you see an animated scenario played out. And in this case, you see some of the storyboard on the screen. It was a conflicts of interest scenario. And there's a back and forth. And then there's a moment of what to do next, the ethical issue at play. And what Rhoda does as a storyteller asks the audience 3 basic questions. And how we designed our instructional design for this one was to create an opportunity for whoever's watching it to press pause. Whether or not they use the pause or not is up to them, but it's an opportunity if you're in a setting for a business leader to press pause and then have a discussion on the ethical issue, a short discussion. There are 3 basic questions, usually, what's at play here? What's a conflict of interest? And they can press pause and they have the discussion, and then Rhoda comes back or the animation comes back, closes it out with Rhoda saying another successful day in the ethics zone, some type of play off of the Rod Serling language. It is fabulously done. Working with the Learning Center has been so much fun on this because they're so creative. And we've actually been able, as we've developed, we're in our 4th one now, as we develop them, each time we get a little bit more creative and fun. And I learn more. I'm not a big I did not watch that show very much, but I've learned a lot about how they speak. And I've learned now, oh, let me Google this. Maybe this is how we would write this storyboard. And we've really been able to streamline and get some great content. We've done one on vishing, conflicts of interest. This one we just posted last week, one on accurate time reporting, and coming up soon is a gifts one. And they're super fun to create, and the people we work with are so talented. So I'm really proud of this series that we put together.
So you intimated a little bit, but can you give us a little more on some of the barriers and how you overcame them?
One of our biggest barriers was the fact that we picked something that is potentially intellectual property. So our first go around, we were definitely on the verge of intellectual property. So we had a back and forth with the lawyers and trying to modify and make it less something that would be violating the Twilight Zone or Rod Serling's intellectual property. And that was definitely a challenge because I guess our attorneys have a very conservative viewpoint. And so we want to follow our guidelines. So we were able to do some tweaking, make it less that. One of our agreements, though, is that we wouldn't share it publicly, and it would be only for internal use. So though I would love to share it with you because I'm so proud of it, I can't. So that has definitely been a challenge throughout the process. And I think the other one that surprised me the most was the development challenge in terms of the time it takes to put these together. And it's not because it's because the resource demand on our learning center, because it becomes so popular, because they are so good at what they do, we are on now like a queue. And so so even though we've been ready for 3 months for our gifts one to be done, they're churning a lot for a lot of people. So as they become more popular, their resources are in more demand.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to move on to another polling question that'll lead us to the second principle that has guided our work. So before we share with you what we're doing, we want to ask you, how do you feel about storytelling? Does your organization use it as a form of engagement around ethics and compliance topics? And you got your choices there. We use it, but they have to be scrubbed or fictionalized and generic. Or we use real stories featuring real employees.
So
Let us know what's going on. Okay.
The results are 14%, we do not use storytelling, and 86%, we use real stories that have been scrubbed.
Okay, so that's where we had stayed for quite a few years. So next slide, please. And then we moved on from that to real stories. But let's start with principle 2. So again, the challenge being training fatigue, right? And that seemed to ratchet up over the last couple of years. We're in a heavily regulated industry, and it seems like every other day there's a training and it needs to be required and you have to go through that. So just being conscious of there's a lot of required training on people's plates. We want to be in the forefront, but we also recognize all the modern trends with the way people want to be engaged with due to social media and technology today, that we had to modernize ourselves a bit too. So this was the principle, again, the one we learned from the E&C and learning community. How are we going to get more timely, tailored, and relevant content out to people, right? Not just sort of mass generic content, but the right content in front of the right people at the right time. Next slide, please. So now we're going to show you one of our videos in one moment. We'll play it, but I just want you to notice on this one, it was developed before, stylistically, this series was developed before the two you just saw. So look at it. It just sort of demonstrates our internal growth as an organization and the tools available to us. It's very well done, but it's a little, you'll notice, it's not as sort of sophisticated as the ones you just saw. So again, this was earlier in our journey. In this video, you're going to watch some characters, and the overall storyline is that there's some rumors that are creating tension within the organization in a very particular department. And this is something we use in our ethics and compliance training. So if you could play the video.
Stuart, something's felt off all week. And now it's like everyone is watching me, but not talking to me.
It's probably nothing. You've been out for a while. Give it a few days and they'll warm up again.
I don't know, but my gut's telling me there is more to it.
You know how it is around here. If I were you, I wouldn't waste any time worrying about it.
I hope you're right. We're busy enough, and the last thing we need are any additional distractions. If we're going to finish this project on time and within budget, we need to work as a team.
You'll never believe what I heard today.
It's always something around here. Now what is it?
It's big. Elijah wasn't really on vacation for the last 3 weeks.
So what's your point? I haven't got all day.
I heard that Elijah had a breakdown in the office and had to be admitted to the psych hospital.
Even if that turns out to be true, I'd keep that to yourself.
Okay, but you didn't hear it from me.
Okay, you can stop that video when you get a chance, Chris. Just wanted to give you guys a flavor of that. Next slide, please. So we affectionately, or I affectionately was calling that stylistically my Archer days, if anyone's watched sort of adult graphic comic style or reads those type of novels. But again, you can kind of see where we started with the you know, the text in the bubbles and where we've evolved to, even just sort of the look and feel. So the content was really well done, but we've changed. David, let's bring you into the conversation. What I'd like you to do is talk about the structure of the project. How were those videos used? What were some of the other topics? And how do you source ideas to create the videos? Like, where does it come from?
Got it. So hi, Susan and everyone. So definitely want to share that we actually are fortunate that we actually have more than one format in how we conduct our code of conduct, or we refer to it as our standards of business conduct training. And so one format we do is the e-learning or virtual online training. But in this particular project for this year, our training is employee-led. So what does that mean? That means that in our current project, we work with the organizations. We have facilitators who are selected by their VPs in the organizations. And the facilitators are then brought in to be able to work with us and our team to be able to provide training and have those discussions at the local level. And the discussions work in any fashion. In this particular model, we have the ability to do it where in the past it was done more in person. Because of the pandemic, we were able to dive into the virtual setting, and we were able to even now do it in a format like using MS Teams to be able to have those discussions. And the facilitators work to determine to look at the 7 videos that we have provided to them. One of them you just saw, and the other topics that we cover are things like retaliation, accurate record keeping, you know, about health and safety. And the beauty about it is that it's not where it's kind of one size fit all type of model, where the organizations can choose out of the 7 videos I have here, 2 of them that is relevant to my organization, to the theme that's going on. I can have a group where, hey, we just had a situation about accurate timekeeping or accurate record keeping. That seems to be like a really great video, a great discussion to have with my team. And we give the facilitators that flexibility. That way they can go ahead and have those discussions at that local level. And we have found that to be really great, very engaging. And again, it does not create that level of, you have to do it this way and only show these 7 videos in this particular order. You can change it up. You can switch it up. You know, one session I can have, I want to show these 2 videos, and a different session I can show 2 completely different videos out of the 7 that we provide them. And we found it to be really great, really engaging, and something that we're excited to do, particularly this year, because we're working with the facilitators, we're working with the organizations, and to provide that type of resource and the support and having those discussions, which is really great, having them to speak up, which is our goal.
So we did get a lot of questions here, and I know I said we'll hold questions, but let's see if you could tackle a couple of them real briefly. First, how do people get the videos, or how are we getting them out across the organization? Are we tracking who's using what, or how many hits they get? And there was another one I didn't catch, but could you just talk about those 2 things a little bit?
Sure, great question. So we are currently holding our videos in different platforms. We have it in our intranet, which is our Connor site, the SharePoint site. All the videos are there uploaded and available to our employees and to the facilitators. We also are working off MS Teams, so we created an actual team channel, which is an extension of the SharePoint site as well too, allowing the facilitators to get access to the content. We provided them with essentially a training slide, PowerPoint slide deck, which gives them an overall template of the entire training, and giving them the ability, again, that level of flexibility where they can slice and dice it how they want it, customize it to make sure it fits the mode for their groups and their teams.
Great, thanks. And we do a little tracking. Tricia would know best about that. We try to get rough feedback from the facilitators to say which ones did you use. Trish, you want to?
So we actually have a facilitator wrap-up form. We try not to use feedback too many times.
Yeah.
So every facilitator after completion of their sessions is asked to complete a wrap-up form, which tells us which scenarios they use. So that's how we track which scenarios are being used. For the other scenario training videos and stuff like that, there are statistics that Connor has available that we can access views that way as well. How many people access a certain page. So we haven't done a lot of that recently, but we have done that in the past. It's
Great.
available for us.
So David, just to follow up, the videos themselves, they provide a nice way or means to engage with employees in small group discussions around what we call in-house sticky, uncomfortable ethics, topics that could be sensitive, right? Can you share some of the strategies that you and Trish use on how you engage with the facilitators themselves, the people who are going to take these videos, go out and use them with their groups? Tell us anything you do to create kind of a community with them, a sense of belonging or support.
Definitely. So as just as it is important to engage our employee and our workforce, it is equally as important to engage with our facilitators. We want the facilitators to always feel empowered and encouraged and supported through the entire process. We know that facilitators who are selected by the organization are not facilitator by trade, right? They don't have an instructional type of background or a teaching background like some of us may have in the learning environment space or learning arena. So be able to provide our facilitators with the tools, and it's essentially kind of everything in the kitchen sink, right? We give them everything they need to be able to have what they at their disposal and the tools. So one thing we did, we had a very great kickoff meeting at the very beginning of our project plan to be able to have some introductions. We have some returning facilitators, which is always great to have as part of the mix, along with new facilitators coming on board this year. We also created a very flexible orientation schedule where, again, we're not just having one orientation for all the facilitators, but multiple sessions to be able to, again, engage and have understanding and respect that the organization changes, the business needs change. We have different groups in our utility company, or we work with 3 different big commodities, electric, gas, and steam, and their peak seasons vary based on what's going on in the field, what's going on in the environment. So making sure that we're flexible with our facilitators and their schedule has been very successful for us as well too. And then we hold, which is a very popular one, which I really truly enjoy, which is having our virtual office hours, right? So the virtual office hours is kind of like our opportunity to kind of get back together, very informal in the sense that there's not really like a very structured agenda. It's really more to say, hey, let's gather, this optional. Do you want to have a discussion? Is there, let's talk about maybe one of the sessions you had before. Facilitators are really great at sharing with us and telling us, yeah, I had a great session. I didn't have a really too great session. What are those barriers? And Tricia and I and Susan, and you yourself as well too, we jump in and provide them additional tools, additional tips. We also have facilitators who work with each other offline and they go and shadow each other's classes as well too. And then
So
we do some
David's
one-on-one.
Sorry, David's being slightly modest. Him and Tricia hold these office hours. They're completely optional, and we joke around, if you build it, they will come. This is optional, and they get, and it's a Friday. So picture us, a utility in New York City on a Friday morning, people optionally showing up. And I'm joking about it, but I'm very serious. They've created a wonderful community where people can share and do peer coaching as well. And, they'll regularly have 50, sometimes they get 90 people in those optional sessions. So anyone signing themselves up for free sessions, kudos to David and Tricia. So I did see a question in chat about, is it supervisors or managers who are facilitating? I'm going to kick that over to Tricia. Tricia, talk about why we very specifically call it employee-led and a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so initially when we were doing the design theory was like manager-led, and we kind of strategically changed that to employee-led because we felt that it's really just about having a conversation at the local level and somebody facilitating it. And whoever the vice president selects can be a facilitator. It can be a manager. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's individual contributors. We even have 4 union folks this year who was selected to fill in that role. It's more about giving people the opportunity who have the skills to facilitate a conversation. And it sometimes gives them the opportunity to show off that, to have a leadership opportunity. So it's it's anybody.
Yeah.
We have just to kind of, I'll give you the range. Union, and we got our band, we have a band 4, which is like right before vice president. We have everything in between, but mainly middle people.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I know there might be lots of questions we want to keep to time. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to move on our journey here. So again, those videos that were created in-house. We wrote them. We sourced a lot of the content for them from things that came out of the ethics helpline or things that senior leadership asked us to address. But so they were basically based on real events, but were scrubbed, right? So we were using sort of scenarios that were scrubbed, changing up the facts. We made a big pivot to telling real ethics stories using real people. So Tricia's going to take us through this portion of the presentation and our journey and how we kind of got to that level and a little bit about the why behind it. And then she'll go into some of the details. So Trish, over to you.
So right at the beginning of 2020, right before we all went home, we started a benchmarking process for what we were going to do in our 2021 e-learning. And as Susan said, it was employee stories. People wanted to hear from employees about how they were experiencing ethical issues. And so we built on that and were able to introduce a great application that we used with a vendor to have employees record their own stories on speaking up. And what worked out great was they were on the different risk areas, but we were able to develop 6 different stories on risk areas from employees about speaking up. If you could go to the next slide. So that story that we set up had a basic story arc, a beginning, middle, and end. We had a hook. There was some sort of ethical issue, speak up ethical issue that the employee experienced. They took some action on that, and then there was some sort of resolution. And every story that we had from the 6, that we actually had 7 people record, but we ultimately used 6. And every story that we had followed that story arc. They were all different, all unique, but they were each one in its were fantastic and different as well. Next slide. What we were able to do was we were able to work with this fabulous vendor who WTV out of London, and they have an app called Crew Studio. And this app is like, everybody should have it if you're doing storytelling. It's so simple in its design, because what it does is you set up the questions on the back end in the app for an employee to be able to record, literally like a selfie there, and answer these questions. And in 2020, when we're not going anywhere, not seeing anybody, we had a couple options. We looked internally to see if we would try and use our own resources to record these videos for the people, but this app was fabulous for its time, but for the timing, 2020, not going out to see people, but also for the simplicity of it. And we had an intro session, our actors, employees jumped right on it. They were able to really connect with it and upload. You upload your content. If you record it. If you don't like it, you dump it. If you like it, you upload it. And then Crew Studio took the app, was able to collate all the videos, and then they developed the videos for us. And so we're going to share with you one of those videos that was recorded. This one was on gifts, meals, and entertainment. Gwen. Yeah. And she picked a fabulous, we gave them some guidance on where to go, but she picked a fabulous background with one of the best B-rolls that we could get. So we'll play that for you so you can get a feel for how this turned out.
Hi, this is Gwen Keeble. I work for Orange and Rockland Utilities as the environmental manager in the EHS&Q department. I'm going to talk to you about an ethical dilemma that I had while we take a stroll through this amazing wildlife sanctuary. As the environmental manager for the company, my group and I often meet with new vendors to hear about upcoming or new technologies that can help us do our job. We brought this contractor in from Texas to help us understand how their process works and see if it would be something that we could utilize. And at the end of the presentation, we escorted them out and thanked them, and they let us know that they left behind for us some literature and information that would help us make our decision. So when I opened up the package and saw the bottle of whiskey inside, I realized that I had a bit of a dilemma on my hands. I immediately reached out to the contractor to see if he could come back and retrieve his gift, but it was too late. So I admit I was in a little bit of a panic, and a million things went through my head, and I kind of put it back in the box and closed up the box, not knowing what to do. But pretty quickly I realized I had an awful lot of options available to me. And what I ended up doing is calling Mike Santos in ethics. I spoke to him about it, he understood, and he really helped me figure out what to do next. Contacting the ethics helpline is something we all can and should do whenever we need guidance on whether to accept a gift or an invitation to a meal or an event.
Close it. So our initial goal was to get 12 employee participants to participate. So we would have 2 per risk area. But we found out pretty quickly that recruiting was definitely a challenge. We had to encourage, we had to cajole, we had referrals, we had a casting call put on our intranet. We went about very different ways to get, I knew of one that I'd gotten through the ethics helpline was I reached out to him, said, would you share your conflicts of interest story? This would be fabulous. And we heard, and one of the ones we heard, which kind of leads into one of our challenges, was one we heard on, in the wake of the George Floyd riots. Our company had held some employee resource group open town hall conversations. And we had heard a fabulous, moving speak up story by one of our employees, Nigeria, and really felt that it would be a great story to share with everybody in the company. But we had to go through we wanted to make sure we were, we could use it, and that was appropriate. We reached out to the employee resource group and our Office of Diversity and Inclusion first to say, can we reach out to this employee? Are you okay with this? Then we reached out to, and they said, okay. Then we reached out to the employee, and she had to think about it, but we had nice conversations with her, and she really wanted more people to hear about it. She felt cathartic, a little bit of cathartic, having this conversation, sharing the information. And then we even had to.
It was important to say that she had an upfront discussion with the person that she had the conflict with. And I think there was both acknowledgement there that we would not use the person's name, but that person was also on board. So, you know, there was that sensitivity piece, but this woman, Nigeria, felt that that person was a friend and wanted to really take the high road and speak up and address it in the right way, as constructively as possible. But there was, as Tricia said, a little bit of sensitivity around the whole issue, and recognizing that she was brave enough to self-record that story, and then it was going to go out to 15,000 people. So.
And some of the other challenges we faced, just high level, we had great people who were fabulous on screen and connected amazingly. And then we had like one or two who we thought were going to be fabulous, but turned out to be very stiff. And we had to work with him a little bit more to cajole the answers from him. Getting B-roll was definitely a challenge for us in hindsight. And as we go about our next project, we kind of have a new way we're going to kind of handle getting B-roll. We had a senior leader who initially was going to be our first person to record, but we had a lot of timing issues, a lot of storms, that ultimately was the last one to record. And I had to go in person and connect with her and record with her so that we could get it done. And so as we go to get ready to do our next batch of employee recorded stories, some of these lessons we learned, even just making sure we don't have to go back to them, because if they change their hairstyle between shots or weeks or months, that's something that we may not be able to make it look like a seamless video. So all those things we learned in the process, and we're using that as we go about. But it was definitely a fun project to work on.
Okay, show them the design, the visual approach of what the videos went into.
Yeah, next slide, sorry. So these all landed into, ultimately the story was taken and put into wrapped around with an e-learning, and we put it in what we call like a Netflix-based story design, and employees could select in any order the episodes that they wanted to watch. They had to watch all 6, but they could watch them in any order. And we tried to make it, a little more modern so that they connected with it.
Okay, well, we're rushing here on time, so next slide. Okay, we're going to ignore this polling question. We still want your thoughts, so feel free to answer it, but we're not going to go through it. We're just going to talk about principle 3. So if you could bring up the next slide. And we're going to talk about some of the things we've done using technology to automate some sticky processes. So this is equally as important as sort of all those sexy videos you saw. This is the non-sexy side of the house, but anyone who's in learning and development training knows for all of the beauty and grace up front, there's a lot going on the back end. So we all know that technology now underlines almost every process and workflow in most people's workplaces, but we wanted to be sensitive to our employees. We put a lot of focus on our external customers, but we were trying to look for ways to better engage with our employee population as our internal customers. So what could we do to make some routine tasks or sticking points easier for them? So next slide, please. David's going to share with us the development of an idea for an ethics app and a little bit about how it came about and what drove it and how it works. David?
Thanks, Susan. So going on to what Tricia mentioned, these are one of the wish list items as well too. We wanted to be able to create an app for our ethics and compliance team. So we have already avenues that are already in place, like calling the helpline directly, go online to the form, or be able to email us directly. So be able to have an app where everybody in this world we currently live in right now essentially has a smartphone. It was time for us to enter into the app arena as well too, and to be able to create an app where employees are able to go ahead on the comfort of their phone, very easy, one click, kind of one-stop service where they can go ahead and raise a concern or speak up. In addition to that, and the theme of pivoting, right? Today, we also encountered some challenges when we were developing the app. We had to do some benchmarking internally, externally. We had to look at what is the best app that we can go out there. We know there are companies out there that build apps every day, all day. And with that being said, there's a cost associated with it. Because we were already jumping into Microsoft 365, we realized that Microsoft actually offered options like, homegrown app building. We can actually build an app internally. So therefore, we didn't have to worry about the cost. But the other challenge was we wanted to put everything and anything we could think of, all the bells and whistles, into the app. And then we had to take a step back and look at what is the core mission or the core goal of this app. The app is for them to get to us, to report or raise a concern or reach out to any of our other departments that we work with, like diversity and inclusion or corporate security. So we had to streamline. We looked at the app and we made the app very easy, a couple clicks here and there. And right now, again, it's one of our new avenues that we have rolled out this year, actually late last year, for our employees to be able to use.
Okay, thank you, David. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here, but we're going to ask, David's going to share the background and set the stage on how this next series of automations or process improvements make it easier for us, the training team, to connect and engage with, again, all of our customers, including our people who facilitate for us, our training coordinators, and our employees. So David, start off with this class request form and work us through the back end of what training and employee acknowledgements look like and how employees get credit in our learning management system for completing a training course.
Definitely. So a little quick background. In the past, people who went through our discussions or our training, it was very manual. They had to, once the training was completed, they had to sign in like an attendance sheet, paper and pen. Can you imagine that, right? I know we're after the pandemic, we're very virtual more than ever before. But there was a time that, yes, people were signing and with, manual forms and paper.
Just
and
touching the pen, right?
Right, with pen, right? So submitting them, so allowing us to have this new enhancement working off Microsoft as well too, to be able to create this form to automate the process where facilitators are now able to actually submit a request to our team to let us know that they're going to hold all these sessions in the organizations. It benefits us as a team because for tracking and reporting purposes, we're able to now see not only in real time when classes are being created into our learning management system, but we're able to forecast and see, yeah, hey, this organization have their classes scheduled out throughout the entire summer. Where in the past, we're a little bit in the dark a little bit because we were very truly dependent on the organization to complete their training by the deadline. And we had kind of more of additional follow-up. This minimized the follow-up for us because now we can report it, we can track it, and we have a record of that. Which leads me to the next form. Next slide. So the next form that we were able to create was our acknowledgement form or attestation form. This form did two things in one for us. In the past, employees had to either complete a separate acknowledgement that they understand our code of conduct, standards of business conduct training, and then another paper or attendance sheet just for them to take credit for the training. By creating and combining both tasks into the same form, now our users, which are their employees, they can go in and at the end of the session, complete the form online, get credit for it, and then sign off on the acknowledgement at the same time. We also created another option for employees who are really great and comfortable with using technology. We created a QR code, right? QR codes are great. They're very relevant in today's world, especially after the pandemic, where QR codes kind of just branched out, and we were able to jump on that as well and create a QR code for our acknowledgement form as well too. Employees use that at their comfort. If otherwise, they can go online and complete it themselves. Now, when the acknowledgement form was completed, it then get to our next option, next slide, which is allowing the employees to be able to provide feedback. Although the feedback, it is optional, it was truly encouraged, it was very engaging, and because it was part of the form, meaning the form was completed and they got this very nice thank you email or window to say thank you for the acknowledgement. Here's an opportunity to give us feedback for the session, feedback on the trainer, feedback on us as a team, how what's the impact in our in the ethics and compliance space, and then just getting to that point. And then let us to our next slide, which is going to be our virtual system called EvaBot. So EvaBot actually works in conjunction with the forms. It picks up all the acknowledgements on a master Excel spreadsheet, puts it into a SharePoint site, and then drops it into our learning management system. All where remove all the middle individuals to kind of give people credit. This allow employees to be able to get credit in real time, automatically. And again, another new enhancement that we was able to bring into our ethics and compliance space.
And I'll add that a lot of these tools, we were able to really optimize our use of not only MS Forms, the SharePoint Teams platform, and Power Automate. So David and I have done a lot of YouTube videos and learned a lot, but we've been able to kind of make use of the things that are available to us with just a little bit of learning that we had to do. So it was a real great process to be able to make it a better user experience for people.
Definitely.
Okay, next
and we have
slide.
1 minute.
Yeah, we have 1 minute. Next slide. So thank you for staying on this journey with us. We know we covered a lot in depth and rather quickly. Our learning journey, personally, for Tricia, Dave, and I continues. We're always looking for better ways to sort of improve and connect with the people we support. And as encouragement, you can leap and the net will appear. Try it out, fix it. If it doesn't work, try something else. And remember, at the end of the day, it's all about the stories and connecting with the people you serve. We'll stick around for questions if anybody has them. And you can always reach out directly to any one of us if you wanted to do any type of follow-up or you needed more information. But thank you for your time.
Questions after the chat closes can be done on the impact page. When I close the meeting will be closed and you can't post them there. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know, Mirka has a question and I will do my best to answer it real quickly for her. She wanted to know how difficult it was getting into the risk for people who are involved in, I guess, or even a story that cover risk areas like ODI, harassment and stuff like that. And I think Nigeri's one is a real good example. We just made sure we were covering all our bases and having the difficult conversation. She was sharing a story about how somebody asked her if she was going to go grab some Chanel shoes out of, and I think it was break a window or something like that. She was offended. It was uncomfortable. It was an uncomfortable comment at the time. And so it's just finding the right person who's willing to share the story.
Okay, I'm going to get into the session here, guys. Thank you.